So March 1st, 2026, Kuwaiti F-18 Hornet looks to have launched 3 AIM-120 missiles or AIM-9 Sidewinders or a combination of the two, and potentially took out those 3 U.S. Air Force F-15E Strike Eagles over Kuwaiti airspace. That's being reported by the War Zone and a few other outlets, but it hasn't been confirmed by the U.S. military yet. But in this video, we'll be talking about if that situation happened, how it happened, and how to prevent it moving forward, as well as some precedents on things like this happening before. Right now, Iran is slamming the entire region with drones. They're really focused on drones. Their ballistic missile capability has been crushed from what it was in the early days, and now they are really focused on drones. And here's some of the breaking news happening right now. So it looks like NATO intercepted a ballistic missile from Iran that was heading into Turkish airspace. So as you can see, Iran's desperation is stepping up. It also looks like Iran is doubling down. They've targeted the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE. All the different embassies are being focused on from Iran right now. Looks like those are being targeted with their Shahed drones. So at the end of the day, that F-18 pilot, dude, that is a huge mistake. Luckily, no one was killed in these shootdowns, but blasting blue-on-blue forces out of the sky is just tragic. This happened right in the middle of Operation Epic Fury. That's the US-led hammer that's currently dropping on Iranian forces as we speak right now. Iranian missiles, drones, but Iran is trying to punch through all the different defenses and cause as much chaos in the region as possible. And in this situation, they definitely added to that chaos. An Iranian drone looks to have been reported to have just slammed into a U.S. location at a commercial port. The Kuwaiti pilot at this point is going to be on edge. I mean, on a razor's edge. It's very interesting to me that it was just one F-18 that's being reported as doing this shoot down. So it's very interesting to me that this was one F-18, because the F-18s will typically operate as 2 or 4 ships, but this Kuwaiti pilot was likely very on edge at this point. Seeing drone swarms coming in, knowing there's ballistic missiles in the area, this is a very high threat environment. And at the end of the day, fog of war can sneak up on even the best of pilots. But likely that Kuwaiti pilot saw on their radar scope multiple contacts in a row that mimicked what he would think a drone formation would be doing. And here's the problem. When you're coming into land, you're flying at about 200 to 300 miles per hour, which could mimic some of those Shahed drones. Those are flying a little bit slower, 150 to 200, but a 50 knot difference on your scope might make you mistake a fast mover for a Shahed drone swarm. I mean, it's not implausible at all. So all 6 crew members punched out after being struck, either with an AIM-120 or an AIM-9X, AIM-9 Mike. It looks to me like these are rear quadrant shots. So as we watch right here and we see this F-15E getting hit, it looks like the missile is coming in from the back. And thank God for that, because that means the missile is going to avoid any of the cockpit and avoid causing serious injuries or death to the crew members. So seeing it kind of hit the engines, that makes me think it could be a heat-seeking missile going in and punching the engines there. Could also be an AMRAAM. The explosion size is incredibly small. So this makes me lean a little bit more towards some sort of an AIM-9 variant. But with 3 of them launching off in rapid succession, that would make me think it's more of an AMRAAM, because the F-18 has the ability to do track wall scan. Track wall scan means you can track a target and you can lock onto multiple other targets, and you can basically fire missiles in rapid succession. Thank God for these ejection seats though. Hats off to the different aircrew life support specialists that maintain and make sure these ejection seats are good to go every single day. Multi-million-dollar Eagles. I mean, at this point, these things are approaching $100 million a pop. So I'm sure the Kuwaiti leadership was like, yeah, here's 300 million plus a little bit of interest. So this is a blue on blue mess that shows how fast things can go sideways in contested skies, with Iran throwing everything they've got at the US, at Kuwait, and at all their Gulf neighbors. So stick around, because we'll do a deep dive into how this likely happened, how the ROE and the tech didn't catch it, and how the ROE will hopefully change. ROE is rules of engagement for you acronym lovers out there. The Kuwaiti Air Force angle, what their training is like, and then we'll do a realistic what-if situation and escalation of how the whole region could be facing swarm tactics like this and what to do. So obviously this F-18 pilot is going to get some heat, right? From their squadron mates, from the actual Kuwaiti Air Force. But at the end of the day, this F-18 pilot is never going to hear the end of this one. His bros are going to pull him aside and they're going to be like, hey man, you're the reason they put do not eat on those little silica gel packets. Like, who needs that reminder? So let's lay it out exactly how it went down. Active combat operations going on against the Iranian regime, specifically on ballistic missiles, drones, and also striking leadership targets in Iran. That's exactly what the F-15E was likely striking. And as we saw in a lot of this footage, the F-15E doesn't have any weapons on it anymore. So basically cleaned off the racks. Went into Iran, cleaned off the rack. So in my opinion, it looks like it's coming back in from a mission, but it looks like it could have been coming in as a swarm of drones was coming in as well. And when you're in an F-15E, you might not be able to wait because tanker resources are likely spread extremely thin. They're focused on the combat aircraft going into Iran, so you can't get that extra squirt of gas that could maybe let you wait and loiter while those F-18s focus on taking on that wave of drones. U.S. forces are obviously in Kuwait to back up Kuwait, but also it's a perfect launch area for the strikes for Operation Epic Fury. This is shared defense and coalition operations, so chaos ensued. And then it's said to have been reported that moments later, a single Kuwaiti F-18 picked up unidentified fast movers on radar, misidentified them as hostiles, and fired 3 missiles. Boom. 3 F-15Es down. CENTCOM has confirmed it as just a friendly fire incident, so they haven't confirmed what it was. They haven't confirmed if it's F-18s, if it's Patriots. But again, now looking at this footage again, having reviewed it many times at this point, to me, the plume, when it hits the back of the F-15E, to me, yeah, a Patriot missile, the size of the Patriot missile, the speed of the Patriot missile, and it's probably going to focus on center mass. Just, that'd be my opinion. I don't know for sure, but that would likely have just hit center mass on this F-15E, and it would be over without likely the opportunity for any of these aircrew to get out. So something more like an AIM-9 or an AIM-120, more likely, you know, the size of the plume hitting the back of the engines, either an AIM-9 or an AIM-120 that was just a tail aspect shot. Tail aspect shot makes sense to me because in this case, it looks like it just goes in and tags the back end of the fighters. Don't know the other two, how those were hit, but if they were coming in to land in succession, then potentially that is what happened. A lot of times fighters will actually do what's called a combat arrival. Now, I don't know why they may or may not have done that here, but a combat arrival is something that all of my formations, we would always do it, but we were also flying back into Bagram, which is a combat zone itself. So coming back into Kuwait, you're not exactly coming back into a combat zone. You're coming back into, you know, friendly territory of a coalition. So you might not be as on edge and you might not be as predispositioned to do that combat arrival. A combat arrival means you come in about 10,000 feet over the field and you basically just do a series of split S's to get down and you land as soon as possible. To me, it looks like these jets were more so flying straight along, and I don't know if they were lined up, but that could be a formation that confused that F-18 pilot. However, there's many ways to deconflict against that. So it looks like this is just an isolated screw up. That's the kind of overall gist of this whole thing that I'm seeing, with the fact that fog of war can create many opportunities for mistakes like this to happen, and it just happens. Unfortunately, there's actually precedence for this. A UH-60 Black Hawk was shot down in 1994 by US F-15s that actually did a visual identification, but the Black Hawk was carrying rocket pods at the time that made it look more like a Hind helicopter. So they thought it was an Iraqi helicopter. Really, it was a U.S. Army helicopter, and 27 U.S. Army members were shot down with the helicopters being shot down. I mean, just a terrible situation. U.S. Army leadership was shot down. U.S. F-15 pilots said they got the visual ID, but again, the differences in how that Black Hawk was set up made it not the ID they thought that they got. But that brings up a great question. What is the ROE during this time where there's fog of war? Because we recently just saw a British F-35. All right, UK, getting in the action a little bit. Looks like they shot down a Shahhed drone. We don't know the distance they shot them down from. Could have been an AIM-120 or an AIM-9X. Again, not very efficient shooting down Shahhed drones with, missiles that are built for fighter jets, as we can see here. But we've seen a lot of footage, even in places like Jordan or unconfirmed locations in the Middle East right now, with Shahed drones being shot down by F-16s, and they're within visual range. They're getting close enough to make sure what they're shooting down is a Shahed drone. And I think that makes sense, because remember, at the end of the day, the Shahed drone can't threaten that F-18. At least at this point, from everything we know about the Shahed drones. So that means the ROE for the F-18 could be, hey, get up close and personal with this thing. Pull up next to it, flip it the bird, and then turn around, do a little teardrop, pull in behind it, and then shoot it down. Ideally with APKWS anti-drone rockets. But even if you don't have those, do a little pull up along the side. Yep, okay, cool. That is definitely a Shahed drone, and then boom, come back around and shoot it. Or you can even identify it for your wingman. So if there's two of you, you just go up. This is called a shooter eye situation, where the eye is in the front jet is the eye. Okay, cool, did the intercept, yep, hostile. Then you pull off, you get about a mile of separation. Your wingman's just chilling back there, gets a nice lock on, and whew, weapon away. We did that tactic a lot during ACM, air combat maneuvers, where we would visually identify to make sure that we were shooting down the actual threat and not a friendly. So the F-15Es were out there supporting allies, and this hits hard because it shows even the best coalitions can have deadly mix-ups. And then remember that F-18 pilot's never going to hear the end of it. The next thing is bros are going to say, hey bro, you're the reason why they put do not eat on Play-Doh. But Iran's playbook right now is pure saturation tactics. Swarms of drones, ballistic missiles, opportunistic aircraft trying to overwhelm defenses. It's said they actually got a few Su-22s airborne that were shot down by Kuwaiti missiles. So again, so much confusion right now, and Iran loves to target Kuwait because Kuwait is one of the best allies of the US. And Iran has already proven they can penetrate drones into different areas while hitting certain areas in the Middle East right now. And they want to make friend or foe determinations much harder in the heat of battle. These recent moves show that they are escalating fast, even though their ballistic missile barrages are coming down because they launched over 400 in the first 24 to 48 hours. Some sources are saying 600, but their drone penetrations are being stepped up. They've already launched over 2,000 drones, and now they're just going to continue to launch as many of those as they possibly can to try to disrupt US and allied operations across the Gulf. But what's their weaknesses? Their stuff is extremely inaccurate. It relies on numbers over precision. They've got pre-planned coordinates, and it probably hits within a couple hundred yards, and that was just a lucky hit on that US Tactical Operations Center. So that's an environment where this tragedy unfolded. Adversary trying to exploit chaos, and a split-second radar call goes wrong, misinterpreting what you're seeing on your scope, and needing to change the ROE to an ROE that calls for a visual ROE. I mean, you can't mistake an F-15E for a Shahed drone. If you have even two brain cells as a fighter pilot in a within visual range situation. Now on a radar, when your radar is saturated, you should still be able to determine that based on US protocols and different modes of IFF. There's different modes of IFF, which the F-18 should have had and the F-15E should have had. So worst case scenario, this pilot maybe was having a super bad day and saw those symbols, but it didn't compute in time because their blood was pumping so hard from seeing Shahed drones strike their own country. But not having a lot of combat experience can make everything seem like an emergency as a fighter pilot. I mean, I remember my first couple combat missions, extremely difficult to slow everything down and take in what's going on. So you got to surround yourself with someone who has experience. And that's why in the F-15E world, F-16 world, F-35, F-22, if you have a new wingman, you're going to put an experienced wingman with them to help them calm things down and slow things down and make better decisions. But in this case with the F-18, we don't know exactly who is up there with them. Were they up there as a single ship? And again, that's another reason why being a single ship is not a good idea. And if I was in this guy's squadron, I'd pull him aside and be like, hey dude, you're the reason why they put not a flotation device on pool loungers. So again, we talked about likely this being an AIM-120, multiple shots. That's more of the case for multiple shots would be an AIM-120, but you could also have a lock-on with an AIM-9X or an AIM-9 mic, and that supports the AIM-9 as it then goes and guides onto a heat signature. So the size of the explosion, after reviewing it a few times with you guys, does look to be a bit smaller than what a Patriot missile would do. And people have been asking, well, wouldn't they have gotten radar alerts? Potentially, but a lot of times when you're coming into a friendly area, you do what's called a fence out, and you'll actually turn off your radar warning receiver, because a fence out happens when you cross into blue territory, because you don't want some sort of accidental firing of a weapon or the laser. You actually have a laser on these fighter jets that's used for targeting, so you don't want that to accidentally get tripped. So you do what's called a fence out. You typically turn off your RWR, but now likely the RWR will be kept on. That's the radar warning receiver that will likely be kept on even if the master arm switch, that's the switch that allows you to fire missiles. So you have to put that to safe or armed depending on what you're trying to do. So maybe the protocol will change now with going to safe with the master arm, but keeping your radar warning receiver on. However, being painted by that radar wouldn't have set off major alarm bells to the F-15E crews, because in a contested environment in an airspace, you're going to be painted by multiple friendlies. But the F-18, as you're painting the different friendlies, you should be seeing a friendly symbology over the friendlies, like a circle, instead of like a death Dorito. We'd call it a Dorito that would be over top of the actual bandits, but a circle would alarm you and tell you, oh, this is a friendly situation, and you'd be seeing all the different friendly squawk codes there. So a radar assisted Sidewinder could help lock on that Sidewinder, and it would basically be stealthy until impact if the radar warning receiver was off. Bottom line here, this was likely a lethal BVR shot where the F-18 pilot saw what he thought were drones. So let's move to the 4D chess strategic analysis section. This incident screams the need for tighter integration, real-time data links, better IFF protocol, potentially even AI-assisted identifications to cut through the electronic countermeasures fog, the saturation tactics fog. The US and Kuwait are rock solid allies. So to me, no intent for this to have been done on purpose. That's my opinion. That's my official statement. I do not think this was done on purpose. I think it was high tempo operations under fire. Strategically, it exposes coalition vulnerabilities that Iran wants to exploit. And Iran wants to sow doubt in the different coalition. They want the coalition to doubt each other. That's why Iran right now is slamming these drones and ballistic missiles into US sites and even civilian sites in its Gulf neighbors. Know your enemy, know yourself. This shows the need for training. This shows the need for stepping up interpretation of radar signatures and potentially even new corridors and new approach procedures for F-15Es when they come into land from a combat mission. And again, even if these F-15Es had been warned with their radar warning receiver on, when you're at 250 miles per hour, there's literally nothing you can do. Maybe puke out a flare or two to try to flare off that missile, but at that speed, you really don't have the maneuverability that you need to outmaneuver a missile at all. And then again, we got to rib this Kuwaiti fighter pilot. I mean, in fighter squadrons, you rib each other if you make a mistake. And this is basically the ultimate mistake. I mean, this Kuwaiti fighter pilot is literally the reason why Starbucks puts contents hot on every one of their cup, even though you just ordered a steaming hot cup of coffee. He's pretty much the reason why crayons have a non-toxic label, because yeah, someone's gonna try to eat those things. But there you go, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed that breakdown of this accident that happened. Likely much tighter protocols happening now to prevent blue on blue force. And again, super pumped that this crew made it out. Really awesome to see how the different pilots, the pilots and weapons systems operators, handled being approached by the locals. Seems to me they did a great job, but what a wild situation. Hope all the crews are healed and ready to go and back in combat as we speak. Thanks for watching, guys. What do you think will happen from this incident, and what do you think actually happened? I mean, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me what you think actually happened in this blue on blue, and what tactics, techniques, and procedures will actually change. Those TTPs. Had to get you one last acronym in there. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Go ahead and follow me on X, follow me on Instagram if you want to see me do a live pretty much every day at this point. Right now, it's focused on the Iran war. Click the link in the description. Join the Max Ready Room. I'll see you guys over there, and then watch this next video that pops up right here. That's pretty much the best compliment you can give me. Thanks so much for watching, guys. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off.